We're talking today with Harvey Lugten of Grand Rapids, Michigan. The interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Mr. Lugten, can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself? For instance, where and when were you born?
Okay, I was born and raised in Holland, Michigan.
And what year were you born?
I was born in 1922, and I went to Holland High School. I graduated in Holland High School in 1940.
Now, what did your family do? What did your father do for a living?
My father was a cabinet maker, and my mother was a homekeeper.
And was your father able to keep his job through the 30s and through the Depression?
No, he had real problems. My dad had built a new house shortly before the Depression, and he ended up losing that. And he also developed rheumatoid arthritis and pernicious anemia, so he worked off and on, but he was a good cabinet maker, and when the furniture factories had orders, he usually had a job, but you know, in those days it was really rough to even sell anything, let alone furniture.
So did you work while you were in high school?
I was a paper boy for most of my high school career. Yeah.
Now, you graduate in 1940. Now, at that time, were you aware at all of what was going on in the world? Did you know there was a war in Europe and that kind of thing?
Well, excuse me, about that time, there was a company called Bond Aluminum Brass Corporation that was building a plant in Holland. And the plant's name was Holland Precision Parts. Well, my dad, among other things, was security for that while the plant was being built. And I as I mentioned, graduated in June of 1940, but I was a half-year student. Back in those days, you could start school at the second semester, so I had completed the requirements for graduation, you know, in February. And about the time I graduated, the plant was ready for occupancy. So I ended up getting a job in that plant. When I reached 18 in April 19th, and I was a 6-1 hired there. And I ended up working in the tool room and setting up the tool room and working there. And I worked in the tool room until I joined the Navy.
Okay.
Well, I didn't join the Navy. I had 3 different deferments. My name came up, I don't remember just when, it must have been in 1982.
42?
Or 42. Yeah. And they found out that I was going to be inducted, and they got me a deferment, a 6 months deferment. Well, I accepted it, and then at the end of the 6 months, they renewed it for another 6 months.
Now, was this because you were working in an essential industry? Was that
Right. Okay. Right. This company was manufacturing bearings for piston bearings, crankcase, crankshaft bearings, all kinds of bearings.
Right.
And
now, were you also kind of responsible for supporting your family at this point, or did your father have regular work then? Or?
Well, off and on. Right. He ended up working for security for the plant too. So when he could work, he usually had a job.
Right. Now, do you remember how you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Well, I was home on a Sunday afternoon, and you know, listened to the radio, and that's how I learned about it.
Now, before that, had you been expecting that America was going to get into the war or anything like that, or were you not worrying about that at all?
That hadn't bothered me. You know, I was too busy chasing girls or something like that.
Okay. Now, and then, of course, when it does happen, did you think that you should go and volunteer, or were your friends doing that?
Well, that was part of the problem. I had these deferments, you know, and by the end of the second deferment, all my buddies were in service, and I was kind of a oddball because I wasn't in service, and I had the third deferment, but I refused it, and I ended up having to go to the draft board, of course. And when I got to the draft board, I had a choice of joining either the Army or the Navy, and I had selected the Navy.
Now, why did you choose the Navy?
Well, living in Holland, I was always near water, on or near water or in it. And, and I had a little sailboat on Black Lake, which is now Lake Macatawa. And I just enjoyed either fishing or swimming or sailing my old wooden sailboat.
Okay. So when did you join the Navy then?
Well, when I went to the draft board, I joined the Navy in '43. I think it was March of '43.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, once you signed up, then where did they send you for training?
To Great Lakes Naval Training Station for boot camp.
Okay, so that's in Chicago.
Right.
Right. Now,
north of Chicago.
Right. Now, what was basic training like? What did they make you do when you got there?
Well, they taught us marching for one thing, and I don't know why we had to march in the Navy, but that was one thing, we had to do. Just teaching us discipline. That's what they basically were after.
Now, did you adjust well to that? Could you do what they wanted you to do and not get in trouble?
I didn't get into any trouble. I knew better.
All right. Now, were you about the same age as the other guys who were there, or were some of them younger than you?
Some were younger, some were older, some were in their 40s. Whoever's number came up, was either had to go into either Army, Navy, or Marines. So they took all kinds and all ages.
All right. Now, were there people that you were training with who had problems or who were discipline problems or things like that?
Oh, there were always a few that were acting up, and that's nature.
Now, how long did the basic training last?
I think it was 9 weeks.
Okay.
Right.
And then after that, what did you do?
At the end of the 9 weeks, believe it or not, they sent me to machinist school after being an apprentice tool and die maker for 3 years, or almost 3 years. I guess that's the Navy way, you had to learn the Navy way.
So you had to do it all over again.
Right. Yeah, I knew how to run all the machinery and so on, but that's where I went.
Now, where was machinist school?
That was also in Great Lakes.
Okay. And then once you started into that, did they figure out you already knew that kind of thing, or did you just go along and follow the program?
Well, after I finished machinist school, we were sent to different places or asked where we would like to go and so on. And at that time, they were interviewing for submarine sailors. And I was always interested in, as I mentioned, water and, everything with it, including submarines.
Right.
And I had, they weren't close friends, but a couple of friends that had been in submarines early in the war and had passed away. And I was a little concerned about that, but I did apply for submarines, and of course, I had to go see a psychiatrist and so on.
Right.
Fortunately, I guess, I don't know if it's fortunate is the right term, but they accepted me. So I was then sent to sub school in New London, Connecticut, submarine school.
Now, describe how that was set up. What kind of system did they have there for sub school? What did you do when you got there?
Well, I don't know just exactly how to describe that. I don't remember too much about it, but among other things, we had to learned to use a Munson lung. I don't know if you ever heard the Munson lung or not.
Can you describe what that is?
This is a device that would let you escape from a submarine in case you were sunk and,
Right.
laying on the bottom, and we'd have to go up a water tower that was I've forgotten how, it's 30 feet or more, probably more than that, with this lung on. And we had to stop at intervals and, and then continue again. And
how big was the lung, or how heavy was it?
pardon?
How big was the lung?
It was a relatively small device that you put on over your head or around your head. Yeah.
Now, was this something that would sort of inflate and help you float up to the surface? Was that part of the design?
No, you would go up a line.
Okay.
You know what I mean by a line? It's just a rope.
Okay. But I mean, if you were actually escaping from a submarine, there wouldn't be a line taking you up to the
Well,
surface.
there could be, depending on whether or not, the depth that you were at. But the final time that we did that, you had to go without the line. And this panicked some of the guys, and as you can imagine. Yeah.
Right.
Being stuck in a tube, having to go up it.
Okay. Now, some of the other submarine veterans that I've talked to kind of described the training in New London there as pretty intense. A lot of guys washed out. They were pretty selective in terms of who actually got into the submarine service.
Oh, most of them that they had admitted into the program finished it.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Right. And did you actually get to go out in submarines while you were there?
Oh, yes.
And what was your first experience in a submarine like?
I honestly don't remember.
Okay.
You did what you were told, and that was about it.
So you don't recall anything about it feeling really very strange to be underwater or anything like that?
Well, before I actually got on a submarine for training on the boat, I went to submarine diesel school also. So I had, I've forgotten the length of it. That was probably another 13 weeks of submarine diesel school. I had to learn all about operating diesel engines.
Right. Now, was that also in New London, or was that somewhere else?
That was in New London.
Okay.
Right.
Now, what kind of submarines did they have to train you on out there? Were they older boats, or were they the kind that you would be on when you were out?
Well, some were older and some were new construction. Right.
Okay. Now, did you have a specific assignment that you were going to have? Were you going to be somebody working the engines because of the diesel training, or what was your job going to be?
I would be what is called a motor machinist, and that's what I was.
And what does a motor machinist do?
Well, when I got on my sub, I worked in the forward engine room operating diesel engines and also evaporators. Evaporators are mechanical devices that turn seawater into fresh water. And you actually needed a lot of fresh water on a submarine,
right.
with a crew on a small ship, and so that's where I did most of my work in the forward engine room.
All right.
Operating either the motors or the evaporators or whatever.
Okay. Now, when did you complete your training in New London? Was that end of 43 or later than that?
Yeah, it was in early 44, I think,
okay.
And I was shipped out to the West Coast. In other words, I took a train all the way from New London, Connecticut to Berkeley, California. Right. And in San Francisco Bay, didn't happen to be, but there was a big luxury liner that had been converted into a troop ship. And I ended up getting on the troop ship and sailing to New Caledonia.
All right.
And in New Caledonia, we were transferred to a little coastal steamer. And this coastal steamer was a kind of a supply ship for some of the bases. Well, this coastal steamer stopped at New Guinea, and we spent, they didn't have sleeping accommodations on it, so we ended up sleeping on New Guinea, and we had to take Atabrine to prevent malaria.
Right. Well, was there a base at New Guinea that you stopped at?
Yes, there was, a crude one. But we didn't stay there very long, just a couple of days, and then we took off for Brisbane, Australia. And in Brisbane, Australia, I caught a train that took me to Brisbane, to Sydney, to Melbourne, to Adelaide, and then all the way across the Australian desert to Perth, Western Australia. And the sub base for Perth was in Fremantle, which was a short distance from Perth.
Right.
And that's where I caught my ship.
Okay. Now, what was that train ride across Australia like?
It was crude, believe me. We slept on a mattress filled with straw, and from Adelaide to Perth, it was, well, I guess you'd call them boxcars, you know. There was a hole in the floor in the corner for your necessities. And, and along the way, they'd have way stations where they would feed you, excuse me, and the only thing they fed you was mutton. And I don't know if you ever had mutton, but I never had mutton after I got off that train, I'll tell you that. You could smell those way stations about 40 miles from the stations.
Now, did you also have to change trains every time you crossed from one state to another?
No, we had decent transportation from Brisbane to, I think it was Adelaide.
Okay. Because earlier in the war, some of the people who were in Australia commented that every time they crossed from one state to another state in Australia, the railroad gauge changed, so they'd have to get off and get on a new train.
No, I don't remember that.
But they may have actually fixed that by the time you got there.
I don't remember that.
All right. Now, you get, finally, you get to Fremantle. Now, was the submarine base there, was there a submarine waiting for you, or did you have to sit around?
There was, right. And I immediately got on the Hake, USS 256.
Okay. Now, was this a sub that had already been on patrols already?
Right. This sub was launched from Groton, Connecticut, I think in 1942. And they made 2 war patrols in the Atlantic, which were unsuccessful, incidentally. But the only reason they were there was try to destroy German U-boats.
Right.
But they, of course, weren't successful because they couldn't find any, or didn't find any. But then that ship went through the Panama Canal up to Mirror Island, California, which is San Francisco Bay. And from there, they ended up going to Fremantle, Western Australia.
All right. Had they had a combat patrol in the Pacific yet when you joined them?
Right. The sub had 9 patrols in all, and when I got there for the 6th patrol. They, their first 2 patrols in the Atlantic were unsuccessful, but then they had 3 successful patrols before I got on the ship. By successful, meaning that they sunk,
They sunk things and they came back.
Right, various Japanese ships.
Now, by this time, was the submarine service any less dangerous for the crew than it had been earlier? Because it was, a lot of American subs had been sunk already.
Right. Speaking of dangerous, on the 6th patrol, which was my first, we sunk a destroyer and another smaller ship, and then we came, of course, back to Fremantle for refit for supplies and so on, and checking over the ship, which is whatever, fixing up whatever is needed.
Right.
Then the 7th Patrol, we went into, again, the Manila Bay area, and I can't think of the name of well, there was another bay that we tried to blockade too, and by that time the Japs were really after submarines.
Right.
And as I don't know if I mentioned or not, but we were in kind of a wolf pack. We were 4 subs operating together.
Right.
Well, one day, well, we had to avoid surface Japanese surface patrol boats and of course planes too. And one morning, about 6 o'clock in the morning, excuse me, we were detected, and for 16 hours we got depth charged, 16 straight hours. And during that time, I don't know who counted it, it wasn't me, but we had 147 depth charges dropped on us. And fortunately, our captain was smart enough, sailor, I guess you might say, to outmaneuver the depth charges. Either we got below the depth charges before they exploded, or we evaded them, by moving sideways.
Okay. Yeah. What was the procedure that you used, or when if you're detected, you go below the surface? Do you turn engines off, or what do you do?
You operate for silent running. You shut everything off. Everything that you do is done manually, except when the depth charges are exploding. Then you can turn on your engines and try to scoot away, because then they can't pick up your sound if that's what they're using to detect you. But we may have had a leak. It could have been an air leak. It could have been an oil leak. Sometimes they were able to detect submarines because of real clear water, if
it was shallow enough, yeah.
Right. So we never did find out what actually was a reason why they were able to pick us up.
Okay, so you didn't notice any enemy sonar or anything like that?
Well, they were pinging, sure. They were pinging for us, but that I don't think that was the reason that they were.
When you were detected, were you on the surface at that time and then go under, or were you?
I think we probably dove.
Yeah.
Because usually at night we were up on surface charging our batteries.
You might conceivably simply have been spotted while on the surface, and then as soon as they think that might be possible, they go below. You go down, and get out of the way.
Right.
All right. Now, what is it like to be on a submarine while they're dropping depth charges at you? I mean, physically, what's that like?
Well, with everything shut off, your ship starts sweating, and you start sweating.
How does a ship sweat? Or does everyone on it sweats?
Because the moisture and the content in the air. And believe it or not, we got depth charged from 6 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night.
Right.
Without any break. And by 10 o'clock at night, we were all gasping, and we were in our skivvies because it was so much moisture in the boat.
Right.
In fact, there was so much moisture in the control room that there was 4 inches of water sloshing on the control room floor because it didn't have a bilge. So in the engine rooms, we had bilges, so the water had a place to go. But we also had, I can't remember the name of the material, but we could spread material out on our bunks that would help absorb some of the carbon dioxide, but it didn't help the moisture content in the air.
Right.
In fact, it got so bad, you grab one of your big towels and you could wipe yourself about twice with that, and you could wring the water out, and I'm not kidding.
Okay. And so when the 16 hours comes to an end, basically you just can no longer hear enemy ships and there's no more depth charges going. Did you just stay down quiet for a long time first before you move or turn things on?
Yeah, about 10 o'clock at night, things became silent. You know, we couldn't detect any ships or anything. Well, we stayed down for another hour,
Right.
and then surfaced. And fortunately, they had left. I don't know if they ran out of depth charges or what. Anyway, they were gone.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, let's kind of back up a little bit to when you first joined the boat at Fremantle. Now, were you part of a group of replacements who were rotating onto the ship to replace some of the crew coming off? Was that how that worked?
Well, it was done individually. I continued on the same ship for my entire career.
Right. But I mean, when you got there, you were coming in as a replacement crewman?
Well, it depended. Some people asked to be transferred. Others were transferred because of, well, I don't know if they were incompetent or not, but for some reason or other, they were transferred, and that's what happened with me. I was a replacement for another sailor.
Now, were you joining a crew that was mostly experienced then? Most of the guys had been there for a few patrols?
A number of them had been on the first 5 patrols, right? Yeah. The fellow that was in charge of the forward engine room was a plank owner, you might call them, if you know what I mean. They were there from the beginning.
Yeah, because I know that some of the crew, when they were building the boat, would actually even go to the boat works and so forth and be there while they were putting it together and see how that worked. And so some of them would be there from that time on, whether it was Groton or it was Manitowoc, Wisconsin or whatever. So they really were with the boat from the time it was built. And then normally they rotate men in and out. And so some stay, some go from one patrol to the next. But you had a pretty seasoned crew at this point that you were with. Okay. Do you know if the skipper had been there the whole time, or had he come later?
I think the original skipper lasted through, I think it could have been the first 6 patrols. First 6 patrols. And then, when I came on, I had one patrol with the original skipper, and then the second patrol, I had a new skipper.
Okay. Now, describe a little bit just the living conditions inside of a submarine. How was it laid out? Where do you eat? Where do you sleep? How crowded was it?
Well, submarine has quite a few different compartments. The central compartment is a control room where all the action takes place. We have a forward torpedo room, after torpedo room. The officers' quarters were forward of the control room and just aft of the forward torpedo room. The crew's mess was just south, I don't know if you call it south, just aft of the control room. And then the majority of the sleeping quarters were next. And then you had the forward engine room, then the after engine room, then the maneuvering room, and then the after torpedo room. So those were the compartments. There was also a conning tower that contained a place for operating the ships up there too if you were on surface.
Now, was the control room kind of under the conning tower, or was it farther forward than that?
Right, it was.
Okay. And so your regular duty station was then in the forward engine room. Was that correct, or was that just when you were training? What was your regular duty station? Where were you normally when you were on watch?
Well, usually in the forward engine room, especially when you were when we were on surface. But when you were submerged, of course, you you weren't using your engines.
Right.
You were using your motors for compulsion.
Did you have battery power for the motors for underwater, or how did that work?
Right. There were forward battery and after battery, and we had motors that changed the current to propulsion,
right.
Through the maneuvering room. Right.
Okay. Now, how did they work the cycle of watches and so forth? How many hours are you on duty or off duty, or how did that work?
Well, most of the time I was 4 on, 4 off. And, you'd catch a nap and then you'd go back and duty again. It depends on whether you were submerged or, on the surface. And when we were submerged, you really didn't need many people in the engine room. So, when we were on battle stations, my duty was the bow plainsman. Other times, occasionally I'd go on lookout, but not very often. Usually I would have to ask to go on lookout because I wanted a little fresh air,
Right. Okay. Bow plainsman, is that kind of controlling the bow taking in water, putting it out, or controlling your level?
Yeah, right, controlling the levels. You have a forward bow plainsman, after bow plainsman. And you, of course, have whoever the person is in command at that time, indicates whether he wants to go deeper or shallower or whatever. And then you have to adjust the planes accordingly.
Okay. Now, how do they feed you on a submarine?
How they feed us? Well, in the crew's mess.
Yeah. But did you have fresh food when you started, or did you live off canned food, or what did you do?
Yeah, most of the time we had pretty good food. The only thing is, by the end of a patrol, if it was an especially long one, you would end up probably eating beans or, spaghetti or something like that the last few days.
Right. Well, how long were your patrols?
Well, it usually took us about 2 weeks to reach our patrol area, and then we'd be on patrol for about a month, and then 2 weeks back again.
Okay. Now, do you remember where the first patrol that you went on, where did they go?
We operated off of Manila Bay,
okay,
in Lugayan Gulf.
All right. And then do you remember about when the 6th Patrol took place? I mean, was it kind of summer of 44, or was it after the invasion at Leyte, or before it, or? Because Leyte was sort of September, October, something like that.
I don't remember what was going on the other side of the islands, but what was I going to say? Oh, getting back to the 7th Patrol which was my second.
Yeah.
After we got depth charged like that, we were going to head back to base, and we got a message that we were going to have to rendezvous at an island called Panay and pick up a bunch of survivors, which we did. We ended up picking up 29 downed Air Force men, even one submarine sailor that got swept off his ship, and a number of Filipinos. Some of them, a few of them were remnants from the Bataan Death March even. And we, of course, brought them back to Australia. And we also dropped off all kinds of supplies that we could possibly share to the guerrillas that brought them out. They came out on sailboats to meet our ship. Yeah.
Now, that made your sub pretty crowded, though, right?
Pardon?
It made the sub pretty crowded on the trip back?
It was crowded, believe me. Fortunately, there were no bunks to share in what do I want to say? In the engine room.
Right.
So but we hot-sacked it, if you know what I mean.
So one person gets up, another one replaces them in the same bed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So was the sixth patrol relatively quiet then? You kind of went out. It wasn't too eventful because the first patrol you went out on, you haven't mentioned much about, except that you went out on it. The next one seems to be the one that was particularly eventful. That
was
actually sinking
true.
enemy ships and getting depth charged
Right.
and all that kind of thing. Now, what about the last two patrols? What do you remember about those?
The next patrol out of Fremantle was, we, again, we're going up to Manila Bay area, and but we were going to continue on back to the States because we needed an overhaul. You know, after that bombing, or that
Right.
depth charging we took, there was something wrong, radically wrong. But we actually were on a patrol for a while, but then instead of ending up in Fremantle, we ended up in Pearl Harbor. And was it Pearl Harbor? No, we went directly to Mare Island, California, instead of back to Fremantle. And then we had an overhaul there.
Now, what was, as far as you could tell, what was wrong with the boat? Did it just not sail properly or dive properly or just stuff not?
We never found out what was causing the problem. At least they didn't inform the crew.
They weren't telling you anything. All right. But then did they get the boat overhauled in time to do one more war patrol then?
Right. In fact, I was home on leave for VE Day. In, what was that, March of...
It would have been May of 45.
May of 45, right. And after we got back to Mare Island, we took off for, we stopped at Pearl and picked up some more supplies, and then we stopped at Wake Island. And then we ended up being on lifeguard duty around Saipan. But by that time, things were pretty quiet around that area. Most of it was concentrated on the big islands of Japan, you know.
Right. So lifeguard duty, would that be picked up down pilots and things like that?
Right. But and most of them that would have been down in that area that we were at were bomber pilots, and we didn't. You know, there weren't that many bombers that were in flight at that time. So we did stop at Saipan and got a chance to inspect a B-24. For some reason, they felt sorry for us submariners, I guess. They wanted to see what the rest of the world was like, and we got to tour a B-24, so that was kind of interesting. But we didn't have any contacts, but about the end of what would have been the end of that patrol, we were told to head for Tokyo Bay because the signing of the peace was going on.
Right.
And we ended up in Manila Bay for the Tokyo Bay for the signing of the peace. 12 submarines were there with a subtender for the signing of the peace.
So at the time of the ceremony, were you up on the surface so you could observe things and up on deck?
Well, Tokyo Bay is so large and there were so many ships there that we were off in the distance. We could just faintly see the Missouri, you know. So the officers, of course, got, I think some of them anyway, got to the Missouri, but none of the enlisted men did that, other than the ones that were assigned to the Missouri, I think.
Now, did you actually put in at Tokyo Bay and get off the boat, or did you just turn around and go away after the ceremony?
We just stayed there, tied up to the subtender till the ceremony was over, and once the ceremony was over, you headed for home.
All right. Okay. So then, from there, did you go directly back to California again, or did you stop?
Well, we went through the Panama Canal and came up the East Coast, and we went to New London, and in New London, there were so many subs coming home at the same time that they didn't have enough dockage, and so we ended up we stayed there. We had some reason I don't recall, but our boat was selected for view by the public, and that lasted a day or two, and then we were sent to Staten Island and tied up at Staten Island, and that's where well, I don't know. We stayed there for a while, and then I don't know what they were doing with the other subs, but we ended up going back to going back to New London, Connecticut, and that's where I got not discharged, but sent. I got off the boat.
Sent home, yeah.
Right.
Now, did they decommission the boat after you left?
Eventually they did, right. And they used it for training, and eventually it was scrapped, I think.
All right. Now, when did you get back home then?
I got discharged February of 1946, I think it was. And my goal was to go back to college, and I was going back to Hope College, but the classes had already started, but I went there anyway, and they did accept me. I ended up starting about a week late, so that's, well, I didn't have much vacation after I got home. I went right to school.
All right. Now, were you getting tuition benefits from the military, or were you paying for this yourself?
No, fortunately, the GI bill had been passed, and that really helped. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have ever gone to college. I don't imagine anyway, if it wasn't for the GI Bill.
All right. So then, did you complete your degree there?
Yes, eventually. I went to Hope for a year and a half. And during that period, I met a young lady and got married. And 10 months after marriage, we ended up with our first child. And in the meantime, housing had been real scarce.
Right.
And, well, we had rented a home of some of Marie's parents' friends for a couple of months, but they were touring in a trailer,
right.
A 16-foot trailer. Well, when they got back, they wanted their house, of course. We ended up in a 16-foot trailer.
Okay.
Which we parked next to my mother's house, and had to run from the trailer to my mother's house to use the facilities.
So did you decide to go get a job then so you could live somewhere else?
Right. My wife had owned 2 acres north of Holland, and northwest of Holland, and my dad and I started building a little garage house on it, which we did. And I had to borrow money to finish it, and I borrowed money from my mother, and I didn't want to be, dependent on my mother
right.
for sustenance or anything like that, or for owing her money. So I dropped out of college and worked at General Motors, the 36th Street plant, which they're talking about closing now, and worked there for 3.5 years. Well, after I got my loan paid off to my mother, I went back to school. And GM was real gracious about it, and they allowed me to come and work in the summertime, which I did. And I finally graduated in 1954.
All right.
And I graduated again in February, and I didn't have a job because there weren't any math positions open at the time. I ended up being a math major. And
now, would you become a teacher with that, or
Pardon?
We're going to become a math teacher then?
Right. I went back to General Motors and worked in a plant on the north end of Grand Rapids where they were making jet plane bodies. And I ended up in final inspection there and repairing, what do I want to say, errors that they made in
Right.
construction.
Right, quality control.
Right, right. And I did that till fall, and in fall I ended up teaching in Belding, and I taught in Belding for 6 years and Bay City for 1. And then in the meantime, I had completed my master's at Western Michigan, and in supervision, secondary education and supervision. And I had just moved to Bay City. I'd been there a year, and the placement director, administrative placement director at Western called up and said, "Harvey, do you want to interview at Byron Center for principalship?" And I had just bought a new house, and I didn't know what to do, you know. Well, I thought, I'll just go down and interview.
Right.
Well, I did, and they offered me the position. And my mother was still living in Holland, and my dad had passed away, of course, and she was all alone. My brother and sister had moved out of the state. And so I accepted the principalship.
And was this for the high school or one of the other schools?
This was high school,
okay.
Right. So I was high school principal for 3 years. Then the superintendent, who was one of the persons that was involved in my hiring, moved to another superintendency, and the placement director from Western again was going to be the search leader, and he told the board that if they had anybody on staff that they thought might be interested in the position, you might want to talk to them. Well, they asked me if I wanted the position. And again, under my financial situation, I had 3 daughters by that time, and I wanted them all to go to college, so I accepted the superintendency. And I was superintendent for 20 years.
Wow. All right. Now, to look back on the whole thing now, how do you think your time in the service wound up affecting you? Did you learn things there that helped you later on in life, or was it just an interruption in the rest of your life?
My war service?
Yes. What kind of effect do you think that had on you?
Well, I'm not one to look back, if you understand what I mean. I'm still forward looking at 86.
Okay.
And I joined the sub-vets, World War II sub-vets, and I joined the American Legion, I guess in Holland, and then when I moved, I ended up with a cottage on Wolf Lake, north of Baldwin, and I got conned into joining the VFW by a friend up there, and I've been a member of the VFW for quite a few years, but I've not been active in either of the organizations other than to contribute financially or whatever. So, no, I don't look back. I still have 2 friends from the sub-service that they're both about as old as I am, and their wives are about in the same condition that mine is, and so on. So we call each other occasionally.
Do you think
that's about the only...
Well, do you think you learned things while you were in submarine service in particular, just about how to get along with people and work together with people in ways that wound up being useful later?
Well, you have to do that in the subservice because you're so close. So, you're on top of each other.
Did that maybe make it a little bit easier for you to be a principal or a superintendent or administrator because you knew how to work with people and you had some practice at it?
It probably did, I'm sure. Yeah.
All right. Now, are there any other kind of individual incidents or events or things that come into your mind periodically to sort of come back to you about your time in the submarine service that you haven't mentioned here yet?
Well, I don't know if you're aware of it, but when you come back from a submarine patrol, you usually get sent to a rest camp. And in Perth, Australia, the Navy had taken over the biggest hotel in Perth. And when we came back from a patrol, you were given 2 weeks in the rest camp, which you could come and go as you pleased. You didn't have to report in. The only time you have to report in is at the end of your 2 weeks. And I was quite, well, I don't know if it's quite fortunate, but I met a young lady. I happened to be walking through a store, like a five and dime store or something like that. Remember the McClellans and Kresge's and those? It was that store similar to that, and I started a conversation with her. Well, she invited me home with her, and of course, went home with her, and then she, of course, had to work during the week, so I would see her just about every night during that 2-week period. We'd either go out to eat fish and chips or something like that, or go to a movie or whatever, or go to her house. And the second patrol, when they came back, it was just about Christmas time. And I was invited to their family Christmas party, which was pretty neat. We had roast duck, and in this afternoon we went swimming in the Indian Ocean. And
They don't serve mutton for Christmas.
no. So that was kind of interesting.
So in general, do you think the Australians got along pretty well with the Americans?
Oh, yeah, they did very well. Yeah, this young lady, for what it's worth, had a boyfriend that was in the early part of the war, because, of course, being an Australian, they were involved in the British Army, and her boyfriend got killed in the Middle East shortly after the beginning of the war. And well, when the end of the second patrol I was on, we knew we were going back to the States, and I told her that we were going back to the States, and she wanted me to make a commitment, but I wasn't ready to make it.
Not quite ready for that.
Yeah, I was not interested in a long-distance romance.
All right. Well, the whole thing makes for a very good story, and thanks for coming in and sharing it with us today.
Well, thank you.